Hi, my name's Debs Hollingsworth and I'm a SENDCo. I've been hosting a series of events in my local area to just help families and parents and carers who might have questions, who need a little bit of help and support in navigating what can be very complex systems. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about what the role of the SENDCo is in schools. The world of education is absolutely strewn with acronyms. Special educational needs and disabilities itself is abbreviated to SEND or SEND. So are we SENCOs or are we SENDCos? You'll notice that I prefer the title SENDCO with the D. I think the letter D is important in this, but the confusion arises from legislation and guidance itself. So if we peruse through various documents that have been published by the government, you will find inconsistency as to whether we are dealing of the world of SEND or SEN, and whether we are SENCOs or SENCOs, therefore. I have written a blog post about this that you could have a little read of if you're interested, but I definitely feel that somebody has got to be looking after those children who have got a disability and who may not have special educational needs, and therefore I think that's mostly the role of the SENDCO, so I put the D in it. Every mainstream school and independent school in England must have a designated SENDCO. We must be a qualified teacher. There are approximately 22,000 schools in England, and there are approximately 22,000 SENCOs, therefore. And I think that there are probably approximately 22,000 different ways of managing and doing and completing the role. SENCOs are likely to be one of the best qualified members of staff in a school. As I've said, we must be a qualified teacher currently. We must also then complete the master's level National Award for SEN Coordination within 3 years of taking up the post. Many SENCOs have other qualifications too. It is our role to oversee the strategic development of and the day-to-day implementation of SEN policy and provision. The Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Code of Practice 2015 or 2014 published advises that SENCOs should be on the senior leadership team. Doesn't mean they always are, but in my opinion that's quite important. So one to ask, I think, if you've got a child with SEND and you're going to look around a prospective school, do ask the SENCO if they're a member of senior leadership and also what their teaching commitment hours are if you're feeling bold. I think I return to that in a little while. SENCOs do not or cannot diagnose conditions, although some may hold an additional qualification in order to be, for example, a dyslexia assessor, or to conduct assessments towards access arrangements for exams and additional time scribes, that sort of thing. But the role of SENCO itself does not mean that we are experts in diagnosis. However, we should be, and we are, the key point of contact in the school for advice and for support and for future and further referrals. So we should be able to assist in the identification of possible needs and therefore complete referrals and paperwork, etc., towards diagnosis. We also must, of course, make sure that provision is made for children who are identified as having special educational needs and disabilities. It is our role to maintain an overview of the progress of all pupils with SEND, and we always, I believe we are always seeking to develop our practice in order to ensure the effectiveness of the interventions and the support that we put in place. With regards early years providers, every childcare provider also must have a SENCo. However, some maintained nursery schools might they may share SENCos. If you have a small school, it is legal and you're allowed to share a SENCo across sites as long as there is somebody designated with that role who can assist. Registered childminders are also encouraged to or expected to find a SENCo within their local area who they can consult with if they have questions, queries, concerns. And the local authority can and will assist with this. They have, in most instances, an area SENCo. Special schools, however, do not have a SENCo. And that is because the role of a special school is to look after children, most of whom have got an education, health and care plan, all of whom will have significant and potentially very complex additional needs, and all staff, or certainly all teachers, are therefore expected to share the sort of load and to have expertise, to have knowledge, and to have to be able to have host annual reviews and to interpret paperwork, etc. So they don't actually have a SENCo. SENCos excuse me, often have a teaching workload. We also often have other responsibilities. So those things that are related to inclusion. We might be, for example, designated or deputy designated safeguarding lead, and safeguarding can be a huge job. Medical, EAL, looked after children, in some instances pupil premium or literacy lead, etc. So we might have a range of responsibilities, and one of them being SENCo. In order to understand the role of the SENCo in schools, it's also important that we therefore understand the role of the teacher. The SEND Code of Practice sets clear expectations. Most pupils with SEND will be taught in mainstream classrooms. Every teacher is a teacher of SEND. Teachers are responsible for and accountable for the progress and the development of all pupils in their class, including those pupils who access support from teaching assistants or specialists outside of the classroom. It is a requirement of our teachers that we offer high quality, inclusive, adaptive teaching at all times, which basically means that when a child comes into a classroom, they can expect to have good or excellent teaching from a teacher who knows their subject and knows the needs of the children in front of them. Teachers should set clear progress targets for all pupils with SEN that focus on their potential to achieve at or above expectations. Where a teacher has a concern regarding a child's academic progress or their social interactions or their behaviour for learning that they feel may be indicative of an underlying special educational need or disability, they should discuss this with the SENCo, and there should be a clear referral process from initial teacher concern through to the SENCo. They must be aware of all the learning needs that are in their classroom. When I hosted the events which have led to this presentation, I was quite surprised, disappointed and shocked by the number of people who attended and stated that teachers, particularly at secondary, were unaware of the needs of their child despite them being known, despite there being diagnosis or other reports. So that, as I say, is quite disappointing. And for me, it does beg the question how a teacher can possibly be fulfilling the role that is expected of them according to teacher standards, according to the SEND Code of Practice, if they're unaware of the diagnosis. So it is the role of the SENDCo to ensure that every teacher is aware of the learning needs in the classrooms, but once the teacher is aware, it's up to them to make provision. Important to note the difference between primary and secondary and the capacity that both teachers and SENDCos have. At primary school, a child is likely to be substantially taught by one teacher. At secondary school, a child might be seen by in excess of 10 regularly, up to 13 teachers each week. In fact, I recently had a look at the timetable of a Year 7 child and found that there were 15 different teachers every week. That's also not to mention the fact that the teaching assistants, often in primary, the teaching assistants are quite consistent, and in secondary you might have subject specialists or teaching assistants who go and support different children at different times. So the ability to nurture and care for and the systems that are in place are really quite different, primary and secondary, and that's coming from myself. I have worked in primary, secondary and specialist environments. So if you suspect that your child does have special educational needs and disabilities, or indeed if they've been identified, who should you speak to in the school? Well, you'll see on the screen my extremely simple flowchart to explain. First of all, a teaching assistant or a named key adult. You might have conversations with teaching assistants or named key adults about day-to-day progress, little behaviours, incidents, little what happened at the weekend, little things that arise during the day. That's conversations you have or should have with your teaching assistants. If you have a teaching assistant, many children will not. Therefore, initial conversations, the first point of contact in the school should be the class teacher at primary or the named school tutor at secondary. You can have conversations with the teacher or the tutor regarding academic progress and behaviour for learning, initial discussions regarding questions and concerns about progress or behaviour, and you can discuss sensitive information regarding family history, incidents and concerns. At secondary, you will also have some form of head of year, head of house. There are lots of different names for them. I was student progress leader. I've seen various other names for them, but somebody has responsibility for a group, a cohort of children, and you can speak to them regarding those same things, the concerns about behaviour, progress or incidents. When you would speak to the SENDCo would be if you would like to share any highly sensitive information regarding a child's special educational needs and disabilities, their presentations, their behaviours, things that you have concerns about. You can discuss with the SENDCo progress concerns. You can talk with the SENDCo to request external referrals, for example, to educational psychology or to speech and language therapy or to occupational therapy or towards diagnostic pathways. And you can speak to the SENDCo if you would like to request a higher level of support or intervention for your child. Above the not above, because in many cases and ideally a SENDCo is a member of the senior leadership team, and often a SENDCo will also be a deputy designated safeguarding lead. But I just wanted to mention the difference between the SENDCo and the designated safeguarding lead or the head teacher. You can speak to those people if you would like to share, again, highly sensitive information, if you have significant behaviour concerns, if you would like to request a referral to social care, or you might be contacted by designated safeguarding lead or head teacher if they have concerns around behaviours, or they would like to make referrals to social care. And if you would like to make a formal complaint, then you would do that via the head teacher, but I would urge you to explore all avenues first, because on the whole, within the school, there should be adults who are actually very keen to establish good working relationships with parents and to resolve issues before they become serious enough to require a formal complaint. So please do talk to us first. Now, I put this in there because I think there is sometimes a tendency for parents to want to see the SENDCo as soon as a concern arises. But like I said earlier, the first point of contact should be the class teacher or the tutor or the head of year at secondary. And then there should be within the school clear processes of escalation and referral should it be required. In the case that a child has an education, health and care plan, the SENDCo has and retains responsibility within the school for ensuring that teachers are aware of the needs of the child, that is section B of the EHCP, and for ensuring the delivery of the provision as stated in section F. All teachers should be, all teachers should read the EHCP in an ideal world. However, as far as I'm aware and as far as my research has shown, I can't find any law that stipulates that or enforces that. And even though this might be disappointing for some parents to hear, I would say that particularly at secondary level, the concept becomes impractical, if not impossible. As an example, when I taught at secondary, I was head of year, so I had responsibility for a cohort of 180 children, and I also taught drama for 1 hour a week to every child in Key Stage 3. That means that I was actually teaching 210 children every week. It would not have been possible at that time for me to have actually read and retained any information from the document, the Education, Health and Care Plan of the children that I was teaching. I therefore relied on my SENDCo in ensuring that I had access to a digestible format of the information that I needed to know in the form of an individual action plan or an individual education plan or a pupil passport, whatever it's called, but something that is accessible to teachers and where we are able to be aware of a child's needs and ensure that we're doing the right thing to support them. It's also important to note that there has been a year-on-year increase in the number of EHCPs issued and maintained by local authorities. There are associated struggles in keeping them suitably updated and relevant. So for example, many SENDCos, myself included, are fully aware of the contents of an EHCP, but then after we've held an annual review, I will then work from the agreed provision from an annual review rather than the EHCP, and the local authority may not update the EHCP annually, and therefore the document that becomes actually more meaningful to me is the annual review, because then I can keep the targets and the provision current and relevant to the needs of the child. I feel like we also need to mention special school capacity and parental preference. In some instances, it is not realistic for the provision in section F of a legally binding EHCP to be delivered within a mainstream school. Parents have the choice, and I think it's a good thing that parents have a choice, to keep their child in mainstream. However, in some instances, this is very challenging for SENDCos. because we also have the requirement that is enforced by Ofsted and by teacher standards and by the to ensure a breadth of curriculum, that we don't narrow the curriculum for children with SEND, and that they have access to all of the same things as their mainstream peers. Therefore, for example, if an education, health and care plan says small group teaching, but the child attends a mainstream primary or secondary and there is not the capacity for small group teaching within that year group, it becomes very problematic. I think this just needs, if it were me, to be honest, I would be rewriting the whole EHCP system. I think we introduced it in 2014. We've done it. We should now be able to reflect on what's working well and what could be changed. And there we go. I would be making changes. But I think it's also worth noting that in some instances, parents desperately want their child to, in fact, I would say in many instances, to attend a special school. That is what they have stated as their preference. It's what should be the child in the best interest of the child, but there is simply no capacity in the local area, and therefore we might have children who have relatively complex or very complex needs attending mainstream schools which are simply not set up to meet the stated provision in the EHCP. This has been acknowledged by the government in the SEND and AP improvement plan, which noted how adversarial the system is. And if you're caught up in that, I am really sorry. And what I would say is that for the most part, SENCos are doing our very best to meet the needs of the children who attend our school. And on that note, I would like to just finish by talking about the power of positive relationships. Wherever possible, the most impactful and successful outcomes occur where we all work together. We must all try to build and model positive relationships around our children and for our children. Teachers are busy and SENCos are busy, sometimes exceptionally so. Parents who have children with special educational needs and disabilities can be caught up in systems that have delays and waits right from the get-go. Myself as a SENCo, I am busy and I know that I have a waiting list. If I identify that a child needs a referral to an external agency for diagnosis, for example, I have my own internal waiting list because we have so many referrals to make. So you might wait, and I do tell parents you might be waiting even for a few months, even for it to get onto the top of my to-do list. This is unavoidable. 17% of children in our schools do have special educational needs and disabilities, and as we know, many of the services from the NHS are absolutely bursting at the seams or broken, sad to say. But nonetheless, we do genuinely want positive outcomes for all of our children. I know from hosting the events that I did, which is what this presentation was initially made for, an event in my local area for parents and carers, and I know that I met very many who felt really let down by the systems, really let down by the schools, and it really was very difficult to hear and it broke my heart. For the most part, I have never met or talked to a SENCo who doesn't care passionately and deeply. Nonetheless, I think that there are workload issues and there are different approaches by different schools to how seriously they prioritise SEND support within their school. So that's, if you have got a child with SEND and you're visiting schools, it's worth trying to actually speak to the SENCo to get a feel for what you think the policy is, and as well, of course, look on the website of schools because there's a lot of documentation available which should give you a feel and a sense for how inclusive and supportive that school really is. So thank you very much for joining me on this presentation, this video, which had the topic of the role of the SENCo. Also available, the next in the series is identifying and supporting children with SEND in England schools. what can families expect. And there are other presentations that I have made which are called Education, Health and Care Plans. Does my child need an EHCP? And Diagnostic Decisions and Pathways, particularly relating to ADHD, autism and dyslexia. I am likely to be hosting more local events in my area, which is Waltham Forest, and I will share the presentations as and when I make them. Thanks very much. I'm Debs Hollingsworth, and if you want to get in touch, then please use the email address on the screen, info@sendexpertise.co.uk. Bye.